You learn quickly, working in the ER, that the line between everything's fine and everything's about to fall apart can be about as thin as a piece of thread. And if that thread snaps, it snaps fast. That's why I still remember this night so clearly. It was the kind of night that tests your instincts, even when you're exhausted, even when you've been on your feet for 10 hours straight, even when a doctor dismisses your concerns with a wave of his hand, because deep down, your gut tells you the truth, long before anyone else sees it. And that night, my gut was screaming at me before I even walked into his room. The shift had already been a mess. People lined up in beds in the hallway, families pacing like caged animals, monitors beeping nonstop, and the whole unit running on caffeine and muscle memory. I was pushing a vitals cart back to the nurse's station when triage called out, "Room 14, new arrival." I didn't even look up from the chart I was writing in. "I'll take it," I said automatically, because that's just what you do. You keep moving. But the moment I stepped inside room 14, everything in me went quiet for a second. Not because anything looked dramatic. Quite the opposite. The patient, a man in his mid-50s, sat slightly slouched on the bed, one hand pressed lightly against his chest like he was trying not to draw attention to it. His breathing wasn't fast, but it wasn't relaxed either. His skin had that faint, subtle sheen, something you only notice after years of seeing patients right before they go downhill. Just a little too pale, just a little too sweaty, just a little too still. "Hi, I'm your nurse," I said. "Tell me what's going on." He tried to shrug it off. They always do. "It's probably nothing," he said with a thin attempt at a smile. "Just felt weird, tight, like pressure maybe. But I'm sure it's nothing serious." Pressure. The word alone is enough to send your brain into protocol mode. "How long has that been happening?" I asked. He looked up at the ceiling as if the answer might be floating there. "Maybe an hour, maybe less. Started while I was watching TV. Kind of felt it in my arm too, but it went away when I sat down." Went away. Another phrase that should never make anyone relax. I checked his vitals. Blood pressure a little higher than normal, but not alarming. Heart rate slightly fast, but again, not enough to trigger bells on its own. Oxygen fine, temperature fine. Nothing on paper screamed crisis, but something was off. Something I couldn't quantify with numbers. I grabbed an EKG machine. "Let's get a quick look at your heart, okay?" He nodded, though he still looked like he thought he was wasting my time. Within a minute, I had the electrodes placed and the machine printing out the strip. I don't diagnose from EKGs. That's not my role. But nurses know enough to tell when something looks wrong. And this one didn't look obviously wrong. Not textbook wrong. Not enough to shove it under a doctor's nose and demand action. But it wasn't clean either. A couple of borderline changes. Nothing dramatic. But nothing that matched how uneasy I felt standing next to him. I walked out and handed the strip to the doctor on duty. Dr. R, smart guy. Experienced. But that night he was juggling more patients than anyone reasonably should. He gave the strip a glance, one glance, and handed it back. "It's fine," he said. "No acute changes. Probably anxiety or reflux. Order labs, but it's nothing urgent." Nothing urgent. If I had $1 for every time I heard that right before something very urgent happened, I'd never have to work another night shift again. I went back to room 14, trying to shake off the irritation tightening the back of my neck. The patient was watching me with that polite, uncertain expression people get when they're trying to read whether the nurse is worried or not. "So," he said softly, "what did the doctor say?" I forced a gentle smile. "We're going to keep an eye on you, okay? I'm ordering some blood work. In the meantime, if anything changes, anything at all, you tell me right away." He nodded, but I could see it. The fear just behind his eyes. The kind that comes from your own body whispering that something isn't right. I stepped out again and told our tech to draw his labs as soon as possible. But even after that was handled, I kept going back to check on him. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't even rational. It was instinct. And instincts keep you alive in the ER. "Still feeling pressure?" I asked during one of my check-ins. "A little," he admitted. "But maybe it's in my head," the doctor said. "Forget what anyone said," I cut in gently. "Tell me what you feel." He took a slow breath. "I don't know. I feel off, like something's about to happen." And that was all it took. My stomach dropped. I've heard that line before from people who later went into full collapse. It's never dramatic. They don't thrash or panic. They say it calmly, almost apologetically, like they're confessing a secret. I did a quick reassessment. His vitals were slightly worse now. Blood pressure climbing, heart rate even higher. Still not press the code button numbers, but trending wrong. I walked directly to the doctor again. "Can you go see him?" I asked. "Please. Something's not right." He didn't even look up from the chart he was writing in. "I will when I finish this note. He's stable." Stable. Another one of those dangerous words. I stood there for a second, torn between respect and frustration. I knew pushing harder might make him defensive. I knew protocol didn't give me the authority to override him, but I also knew what I felt. I went back anyway. If nothing else, I could keep eyes on my patient until the doctor finally made it in. When I stepped into room 14 again, the patient was sitting forward in the bed now, both hands pressed to his chest, trying to breathe slowly. "I don't feel good," he whispered. His skin was gray. Actual gray. "I'm going to stay right here with you," I said, already reaching for the monitor cables. "Talk to me. What's happening?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I feel heavy, like my whole chest is tight." That was it. Enough waiting. I stuck my head out of the room and called for help. Not a code, because he was still conscious, but loud enough that everyone turned. "I need the doctor in here now." Finally, Dr. R appeared, looking annoyed but following me inside. He took one glance at the patient and froze. The irritation vanished instantly. "Let's get another EKG," he ordered. "Now." I was already grabbing the machine. His heart rate was climbing fast now, the numbers flashing higher than before. The patient was trying to breathe through it, but each breath was shallow, shaky, wrong. As I attached the leads, he closed his eyes. Don't let me pass out," he murmured. "You're okay," I said. "I'm right here." The machine printed. The doctor grabbed the strip, scanned it, and the color drained from his face. "This isn't nothing," he said quietly. "No kidding. Call cardiology," he said, "and get him on oxygen." I moved faster than I thought my exhausted body could. Oxygen on, bed lowered, his hands trembling as he tried to grip the rail, his breathing turning into small gasps. And then it happened. His whole body jerked once, just once, and then he slumped sideways. "Hey!" I shouted, leaning forward as I checked his pulse. Nothing, not a single beat. "Loss of pulse," I yelled. Now it was a code. The room exploded with people, techs, nurses, another doctor who'd come running. The crash cart slammed against the wall as we pulled it in. I climbed onto the stool and started compressions. When you're doing chest compressions, the world shrinks to the feeling under your palms. The sound of ribs moving, the rhythm you have to hold steady, the silent mantra, "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop." Someone placed pads on him. Another nurse pushed meds. Someone else kept track of time and cycles. It was organized chaos. The kind of chaos you train for but hope you never see. I didn't look at the doctor. I didn't need to. He knew what had happened. We all did. And none of us had time to think about it. "Check rhythm," someone called. We paused just long enough for the monitor to show a chaotic line of electrical activity that meant nothing good. "Resume compressions." So I pressed harder. Time became strange, stretching and collapsing at once. Conversations happening around me but sounding far away. Sweat dripping down my neck and into my scrubs. The steady count, 1, 2, 3, echoing in my skull. At one point, as we rotated through cycles, I stepped back to catch my breath, leaning against the wall for half a second. But my eyes never left him. And something in that moment, maybe adrenaline, maybe instinct, made my chest tighten with both anger and fear, because it didn't have to get this far before we took it seriously. I knew something was wrong. I said something was wrong. And if I had pushed harder, louder, more aggressively, would this be happening right now? But there was no time for guilt. "Pulse check." Hands paused. A nurse pressed fingers to his neck. "I've got something," she said. "Weak, but it's there." Relief flooded the room, and then immediately turned into action again. We stabilized him enough to transfer him to a higher level of care. Cardiology was already waiting. They moved him out with a swarm of equipment around him, and the room slowly emptied until it was just me and the crash cart sitting open, drawers hanging out like someone had ripped the insides apart. I stood there with my gloves still on, feeling the weight of everything settle on my shoulders at once. We had saved him, for now, but it had been too close. And all I could think was, he told me, his body told me, my instincts told me, and it still almost wasn't enough. I peeled off the gloves, washed my hands slowly, and tried to steady my breathing before moving on to the next patient. Because the ER doesn't stop just because your heart is still racing. But that wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. Because the real fallout, the part that changed me, the part that still echoes in the back of my mind during every shift, that came later. And when it did, it forced me to confront the truth about how dangerous it is when anyone thinks they're too busy, too tired, or too confident to listen. And it forced someone else, someone who should have known better, to face a reality he couldn't ignore anymore. I didn't get to check on him again for almost 2 hours. The ER swallowed me whole. Another patient vomiting in triage, someone panicking in the hallway, a kid with a bad asthma flare who needed constant reassurance while waiting for a room. By the time I finally had a moment to breathe, the night felt like it had stretched into a week. My legs were heavy, my head was buzzing from everything that had just happened, and a part of me kept replaying the moment he collapsed, over and over again, like a loop I couldn't stop. I walked to the cardiology unit knowing I might not hear good news, but also knowing I had to see him. Not because it was my job, but because I felt responsible somehow. Responsible for catching it early. Responsible for not catching it early enough. Responsible for everything and nothing at the same time. That's the strange curse of being a nurse. The things you carry aren't always logical. When I stepped into his room, the lights were dimmed, the monitors were steady, and a small team of cardiology nurses were charting quietly. He was awake. Groggy, pale, exhausted, but awake. Seeing that made something tighten in my chest. Not fear this time, but relief so heavy it nearly made my knees buckle. He blinked slowly at me. "Hey," he whispered, his voice thin. I smiled and walked closer. "Hey, how are you feeling?" He exhaled through his nose, and it looked like just breathing took effort. Like I got hit by a truck, but I'm here. "You are," I said softly. "You scared us." He tried to laugh, but it came out like a breath that didn't quite know what it wanted to be. He lifted a hand, just barely, and gestured toward the wires and the IV pump next to him. "Guess it wasn't nothing, huh?" I felt a flash of bitterness, not toward him, but toward the memory of the doctor waving off the first EKG. But I swallowed it. This moment wasn't about blame. It was about him, still alive in that bed. "I'm glad you were here," I told him. "And I'm glad you spoke up when you didn't feel right." His expression softened. "You stayed with me," he murmured. "I remember that." "You weren't alone," I said. He closed his eyes again, exhausted. But I could see the gratitude in the way his face relaxed. Part of me wanted to stay right there for the rest of my shift, just to make sure nothing else happened. But I couldn't. So after giving the cardiology nurse a quick update on what I had seen earlier in the night, I headed back downstairs, carrying with me the kind of tired that sinks into your bones. When I returned to the ER, everyone was quieter. Not calm, never calm, but quieter. The doctor who had dismissed the first EKG, Dr. R, approached me as soon as he saw me. He wasn't angry this time. He wasn't busy pretending everything was under control. He looked shaken. "Hey," he said quietly. "Do you have a minute?" I did. Or even if I didn't, I would have taken it. He crossed his arms and stared down at the floor for a moment, like he was trying to decide what to say. Then he looked up, and there was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Honesty, raw and uncomfortable. "You were right," he said. Hearing it didn't give me any satisfaction. It just made my stomach twist tighter, because being right had nearly come at the cost of someone's life. "I should have gone in sooner," he continued. "I looked at the strip too quickly, and I shouldn't have brushed off your concerns." For a few seconds, I didn't know what to say. It's rare for doctors, especially seasoned ones, to admit that so openly. It wasn't dramatic, and it wasn't some huge apology speech. It was more like someone realizing they'd been speeding down a dark road without headlights and finally admitting they couldn't see. "All of us were stretched thin tonight," I finally said. "But yeah, something was wrong. I could feel it." "And I should have listened," he said again. "Next time, I will. Next time." It was a simple promise, but a powerful one. Working in emergency medicine is a constant tug-of-war between urgency and exhaustion. You're wired to react fast, but also pressured to move efficiently. You rely on experience, but experience can turn into overconfidence if you're not careful. Doctors can miss things. Nurses can miss things. Everyone is human. But admitting you missed something takes courage most people don't see. "You helped save his life," I said slowly. "We all did." He gave me a small nod and walked away. And I knew that conversation would stay with him as much as it stayed with me. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. More patients, more charts, more questions, more beeping monitors that demanded attention like impatient children. But through all of it, I kept thinking about room 14, about his gray skin, about his whispered fear, about how close we came, about how sometimes the only warning you get is a feeling you can't explain. Around 6 a.m, when the sky was just starting to lighten, I finally clocked out. My feet felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. My back was throbbing, and my brain felt like it had run a marathon. I walked to the parking lot in silence, breathing in air that didn't smell like antiseptic or stress. I sat in my car for a while before even putting the key in the ignition. I just let the quiet wrap around me. I needed it. Nights like that take something out of you. Something invisible, but heavy. I thought about how many times I'd heard patients say, "It's probably nothing," and how many times it actually was nothing. But then there are nights like this. Nights when probably nothing nearly becomes too late. A few days later, I saw the patient again. He was recovering well, sitting up in a chair, color finally returning to his face. When he saw me, he smiled. Not a weak smile, but a real one. "They told me what happened," he said. I didn't realize how close it was. I pulled up a chair and sat beside him. "You're doing much better now." "I am," he said quietly. "Thanks to you." I shook my head. "Thanks to a whole team." "No," he said, meeting my eyes. "Thanks to you. You're the one who kept coming back. You're the one who didn't dismiss it. You're the one who called for help." Hearing it directly from him, seeing the truth of it reflected in someone who nearly never got another sunrise, hit me harder than anything else that week. "I'm glad you're okay," I said, and I meant it more than he could ever know. As I stood to leave, he said, "You saved my life." I didn't turn around right away. I had to blink quickly, because sometimes emotions sneak up on you even when you think you're used to this world. When I finally looked back, I said, "You helped save your own life too. You spoke up. Don't ever ignore that feeling again." And maybe I was saying it to myself too, because I think that's what this whole story comes down to. The feeling. The quiet alarm inside you that activates before the data does. The instinct honed from years of running toward danger while others run away. The intuition that whispers, even when the world around you is loud, that something is wrong. Sometimes that instinct is the only thing standing between a patient and the moment everything collapses. And I'll tell you this, I trust that instinct more now than ever. If you've never worked in an emergency room, it's hard to describe how unpredictable it is. You can have 5 calm hours followed by 5 minutes that change everything. You can have a stable patient who becomes unstable faster than you can reach the door. You can have a doctor who's brilliant and still misses something because humans aren't machines. But the one thing that never lies, ever, is the moment when the air in a room shifts. When your body reacts before your mind does. When you don't know why you feel it, you just do. I've learned to listen to that feeling like it's another vital sign. And after that night, even the doctor did too. Sometimes the difference between nothing and everything is just someone refusing to look away. And sometimes the person who saves your life isn't the one with the title. It's the one who pays attention. Thanks for listening to my story. Nights like that stay with you forever. And I hope sharing it helps someone out there understand what really happens behind those ER doors. The chaos, the instinct, the teamwork, and the moments where one decision can change a life. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this video. If you enjoyed this story, or want to hear more real-world experiences from the ER, feel free to support the channel. It helps more than you know. And if you haven't already, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who appreciates stories from the front lines of healthcare. Your support keeps these stories alive and brings more people into this community. See you in the next one.